In that, we would have to differentiate a bit about Russia itself as an actor versus the agent of Russia who is acting in Sudan and who has those close relations, which is typically the Wagner group. It's a power struggle between the top two in the country, where the people are just a collateral damage. Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, they're still in their diplomatic dispute over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And for Egypt, Sudan is, in the worst case, a buffer zone.
On the 15th of April 2023, a war broke out in the western part of Sudan, particularly in Darfur and Khartoum, which is the capital city of the nation. Citizens had no clue that what was going and what they should do in the situation. Within moments, this war took a dreadful turn where citizens saw ashes and fire in the capital city. Few civilians died as they got into the crossfiring between Sudan's National Army and the RSF. With this awful sight, it marked the beginning of Sudan crisis. With this, the world also got to know the reason behind the turmoil in the country, which is the war between the National Army and the paramilitary forces, which is also known as by the name of RSF or Rapid Support Forces. Sudan is a country known for its hospitable people and its mineral wealth. Then what has turned this mineral-rich nation into a battleground? Till now, due to the ongoing war, approximately 700,000 people have been displaced within 15 days into the war. Let's have a discussion with experts, diplomats and researchers around the world to know the reason behind this turmoil, how it all got started, and mainly to know that why two different forces of the same country are in a conflict, and where is this war leading the resourceful rich Sudan to? Can we describe the current turmoil in Sudan as a cutthroat competition for power between two men, because of which the whole country is facing the ramifications and is suffering somewhere?
That's exactly how I would describe it. It's a power struggle between the top two in the country, where the people are just a collateral damage or caught in between. So the background to this conflict is that Al-Burhan, the de facto head of state, who is also commander in chief of the regular armed forces, is fighting with Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, the number two in the state, who's overseen the country's most important, powerful paramilitary force. And what triggered the conflict or the breakdown in their work relation or collaboration in governance is a security sector reform. The rapid support forces were supposed to be integrated into the regular armed force, and that brought up the question: who's going to be the next number one in the state? Who will have command over this joint force? And what happens with the one who doesn't have their own autonomous force?
Egypt has always been a part of Sudan throughout its history, reason being it is getting benefited by the Great Nile River. So gradually it has an interest in Sudan's matter. Can we see in the near future that Egypt is taking side of the Sudanese army or the RSF, or what will be the intention of Egypt to safeguard its interest in the region?
That is a likely scenario because Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia, they're still in their diplomatic dispute over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And for Egypt, Sudan is, in the worst case, a buffer zone, but in the best case, it's a partner and a very important ally to stack the deck against Ethiopia. And they have also invested a lot into the regular armed forces in Sudan. And many soldiers in Sudan have also trained in Egypt. And Egypt has undertaken training exercises in Sudan as well. So it is not likely that Egypt would accept a victory from the rapid support forces, but rather back the regime, especially looking towards the regional tensions, diplomatic tensions with Ethiopia.
Russia's Wagner Group is present in Sudan from quite a long time now, and a lot of diplomats are questioning this presence of the Wagner Group in the region. It has been seen over the past few years that Russia's involvement in Sudan is a lot due to the reason that they have good relationship with RSF, which is the paramilitary forces. Can we see a Russian involvement in the war as they have an interest in the gold mines of Sudan, and most of the gold mines in Sudan are being controlled by the RSF recently. So can we see any Russian involvement in this war?
In that, we would have to differentiate a bit about Russia itself as an actor versus the agent of Russia who is acting in Sudan and who has those close relations, which is typically the Wagner group that has had a lot of dealings with Dagalo, but also had a lot of dealings and favorable relations with the established regime. And again, by throwing their weight behind Dagalo, they risk a lot of future revenue streams if the incumbent, which is Al-Burhan, ends up winning. So again, it's still very difficult to give a prognosis about this because there's a lot of uncertainty about who might win in the end.
Sudan's geopolitical location to the world is a significant one as it is present on the Red Sea. Also, world's 10% of the global trade passes from the Suez Canal. So can we see any form of hindrance in this global trade or any form of, even Sudan is a resourceful rich country, so can we see any form of hindrance of the Sudanese natural wealth to the world?
Not necessarily the location in and of itself, but it's rather what is being traded out of Sudan and to whom. That is also keeping external actors a bit on their toes about throwing their weight behind any of the two conflict parties. So for context, Sudan's most important regional trade partners, especially when it comes to gold, are Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. With Egypt, it also has sustained a lot of trade relations beyond gold in agricultural products and crude petroleum. And aside from that, an important trade partner was China. But at the moment, people are still waiting, or external actors are still waiting to throw their weight behind someone because the fighting is very unclear. Dagalo, who oversees the RSF, has a huge stake in the gold business. He has become one of the richest people in Sudan through gold trading. But to gain or sustain access to that resource and sustain trade relations and diplomatic relations in the future, you also need to have a good working relation with whoever is going to be the number one.
It has been seen throughout the history that whenever a country is in a situation what Sudan is right now, external powers try to take a big advantage of it. For example, external alienated powers like insurgent groups or terrorist groups. Can we see in the future that these insurgent or the terrorist groups are taking an advantage of the war and patrolling in the streets of Sudan?
The rapid support forces, they might subcontract from other militia just to establish some sort of tactical advantage. But they also know that the positions that you were talking about, the control, the monitoring of strategically important places is too important to be outsourced to other militia. So they also don't want to threaten their own power position in the country and their own strive for power and influence in the country. And that is something that, in my view, could be a deterrent of maybe contracting, but not giving them any sort of strategic importance in those subcontracted tasks.
Can you tell to the viewers that what is the current humanitarian situation in Sudan?
The current situation is the fighting is still continuing, though the focus is now shifting on what is becoming a very big humanitarian crisis. So when a lot of diplomatic staff evacuated from the country, a lot of paperwork and applications for visas and passports was suspended without any sort of outcome. And people don't, when they immigrate or flee from Khartoum right now, they obviously don't do that as tourists, but as refugees. And when they end up at borders in neighboring countries without any paperwork, that massively prolongs them being able to enter other countries. At the same time, we also saw that, for example, on the Egyptian-Sudanese border, there are hardly any humanitarian agencies or refugee agencies present because they were more active in, say, Chad or South Sudan, and no one was really prepared for this quick escalation.
Everyone wants a chunk of Sudan, keeping in mind how resourceful rich it is. So can we see in the near future any country trying to take advantage out of this war?
Right now, I would say not that many. So instability in Sudan in general is chronic, but it wasn't like full on instability. It was rather where exactly that instability happened that it benefited external parties. So in Sudan, you have ethno-religious divisions. You have divisions between urban and rural places. You have divisions between generally center and periphery. And these all reinforce each other. And the system worked under al-Bashir because Khartoum, as the political capital, was stable. So it could exploit the instability in the periphery by getting a lot of the natural resources. And Sudan's natural resources, they're also not distributed throughout the country. They're also concentrated in those same places in the periphery that are rural, that are inhabited by predominantly minorities. And as long as they had that access there, provided that Khartoum was stable, that situation was beneficial. But now that instability has also taken over Khartoum, which also means you don't have that sort of fortification against instability in the periphery, which means that no one really benefits from a completely destabilized country.